So our guest today is a managing partner at Emerson Collective. And every year when he was here in Chicago, he would come and talk, for which we were very grateful. Our guest today is a true believer, and he is the real article. If anyone can create job and life opportunities for our disconnected young adults, it is our guest today. He is living his mission, and he's devoting his life to serving humanity. And he's so smart that he brought his wife Karen with him today. Let's give us a round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, Arne Duncan. Arne?
Well, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. And it's an absolute honor to see so many friends and folks I haven't seen in a long time. And just want to reflect a little bit. My wife and I have been back in town from D.C. for about the past 18 months, not quite that long. And it's been, the word I've been using is bittersweet. It's been a little bittersweet. On one hand, it's great to be home. It's great to be around real friends and people who don't care about titles and silly stuff, and friends I've had for 30, 35, 40 years. Great to be back in Hyde Park. We live 2 blocks from where I grew up. So that part's been fantastic. It's also a great time to be out of D.C. and to be, again, back around real folks. I needed that. That's the upside. The hard part is that the level of violence coming home and seeing what happened over the 7 years that we were in D.C. Has been gut-wrenching. And violence is not a new issue to me or my family. Growing up as a part of my mother's after-school program in North Carolina, Oakland neighborhood, when I started to get 12, 13, 14, started to lose friends to gun violence. And go to Darryl Fort, Lil Danny Sarden, Levert Hardy, guys who were mentors to me, role models to me, frankly helped to protect me on the streets. And when that happens as a kid, I think it both shapes you and frankly scars you in some pretty tough ways. And one of the reasons I devoted my life to education is I came to understand that none of my friends who went to college got killed, and too many of those that didn't go to college did end up dead or locked up. So it's been a driving force. That's going back 40 years at this point. When I led the Chicago Public Schools, lots of challenges, academic achievement, budget issues, labor management issues, but all those frankly were easy compared to the level of violence that we dealt with. On average, during my 7.5 years, we lost 1 child every 2 weeks due to gun violence. And the overwhelming majority weren't gangbangers. This wasn't stuff at 2 in the morning. This was Starkeisha Reed, who was shot on a school morning at 7:30 in the morning in her living room by an AK-47 from 100 yards away. This was Blair Holt, 2:30 in the afternoon on a CTA bus going home after school, who jumped in front of 2 other kids and saved their lives. Those are like 10 years ago at this point. And I still stay in touch with their moms and their families. And so that was the hardest thing. Everything else was easy and didn't get any easier. And going to those funerals, going to those homes, going to classrooms where there was an empty desk and trying to talk to kids and make some sense out of what was senseless. Nothing was harder. And very, very naively, in hindsight, very naively, I thought things couldn't get worse. I just thought we were rock bottom. And the seven years that we were gone, to see things get so much tougher in Chicago, that hit really, really hard. One of my good friends is Tony McCoy in the back. I'm trying not to start crying here, but Tony's devoted his life to helping kids, and during the 5 years we were in D.C., his son was killed. It's actually 5 years ago. It would have been his son's birthday today. And so this stuff is very real. And so collectively, we have to do something better. We have to do something different. And just coming back and thinking of all the people who would help me growing up, all the people who had supported me, if I wanted to give something back to the city that had given me so many opportunities, academically, athletically, socially, culturally, it just seemed like this was the crisis facing the city. This is what we wanted to try and do. And I'm a data guy, and I'm going to get to numbers in a minute, but I just want to start with just a couple stories of over the past 18 months, just what I've learned, just watching listening. We started work last summer. We funded about 4,700 summer jobs for kids to try and give them an opportunity to do something productive and stay off the streets. And one of our programs is with the Chicago Public Schools with J.D. Chow, who does an amazing job. And she had found some of the kids who were the most at risk in Chicago Public Schools and put them to work actually helping to rehab auditoriums and really do something constructive in their schools and in their neighborhood. And I just went out one day and just had lunch with about 12 kids and just talked to great kids, talked about the program, what was working, what wasn't, and just asked them about just growing up in Chicago, what it's like. And these were kids from different neighborhoods. And I always ask kids, one of our first questions is, how many of you know someone who's been shot? And always, it's 100% of hands go up, always. I then sort of kept going, said, how many of you know 5 people who have been shot? Most hands stayed up. 10, 15, I got to 20, and about half the kids' hands were still in the air. And they started telling stories of this guy was shot in the back, and this guy was shot in the leg, and this guy was paralyzed, and this guy died. And I thought, I've never been to Iraq, I've never been to Afghanistan, but do kids there know 20 people who have been shot? And then I asked the kids, do they think this is normal, or do they know it's not normal? And one of the young guys who was a leader there, it was like it was just starting to sort of occur to him. He said, I used to just ride my bike around the neighborhood, and people would just be shooting, and I would just be riding my bike. And I'm finally starting to realize this isn't normal. And the thing that gets me is we've basically raised an entire generation of kids who are now 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. This is normal. This is what they've grown up with. Those of us who are a little bit older now remember a time when it may have been tough, but it wasn't like this. But this is their norm. They know 5, 10, 15, 20 people have been shot. Last fall, my wife and I, our kids, went out to just help Father Flager, who's a good friend and a hero of mine, who just did a back-to-school picnic and food and playing basketball and cotton candy and handing out school supplies, backpacks. It was just a fantastic day in the park there. Kids had a great time. At the end of it, when the grandmother came up and said, thanks so much for doing this, I said, no, this is fun. We had a great time. Happy to be here. And she said this was the first time she had let her grandson out of the house all summer. And this is Labor Day. This is going back to school. And I can't tell you how many stories I've heard in South of my side of kids who just can't go outside anymore. And it's interesting, for all this violence, as you drive the South and West Side, the neighborhoods often sort of feel empty. There aren't people outside. And it's because it's simply not safe. And I grew up playing everywhere, playing in basketball courts all over the city. And the fact that we've just basically locked kids and imprisoned them in their homes because they can't go out, something's fundamentally wrong with that. Then finally, about 2 months ago, I went out to North Lawndale College Prep High School, a fantastic high school. I was actually on the founding board like 20 years ago. John Horan's a great friend and partner. These are kids in North Lawndale, working really hard, super high graduation rates, the vast majority going on to college. I had a room probably about, not quite this big, probably about 200 kids, 250 kids. We just started talking about what their reality is like. And at that one school, that one high school since August, they've had 14 kids shot. So think about that. One high school. These aren't gangbangers. These aren't whatever. These are kids who are working hard every day, going through crazy stuff to get to and from school. One high school, 14 kids shot. Collectively, we got to do something a little bit better here. Those are some stories. Now let me sort of shift to facts. I'm going to give you a little sense of what I think. Here are just facts. So we can debate my beliefs. That'll come next, but these numbers aren't debatable. 2016, we had 762 murders here in Chicago. We had 4,331 people shot. Here in Chicago, we had more murders and more shootings than New York and LA combined. If you think about the relative size of the cities, they have a combined 12 million people. We have 2.7. But Chicago had more homicides and more shootings than New York and LA combined. Over the last 5 years, Chicago's up 50%. New York is down about 25%. LA has stayed flat and very, very low. There are definitely some other cities where violence has gone up the past couple years, but then there are other examples like Oakland that my team and I visited recently. Oakland, where over the past 5 years, homicides are down 34% and shootings are down 41%. Our challenge isn't just the shootings, it's what happens or doesn't happen afterwards. There's something that I'm really starting to try and understand, and all this I'm learning. It's something called the clear rate. The clear rate is the percent of crimes that actually get solved. In 2015, only 1/3 of the murders here in Chicago got solved. versus 2/3 in New York, in LA, in Houston. In 2016, that number dropped to 1 in 4. So that means that if you killed someone last year, you had a 75% chance of nothing happening, of walking away. In 2016, if you just shot somebody but didn't kill them, there was just a 5% chance of you getting caught, a 95% chance that nothing happened. And when I talked to kids in North Lawndale, we told story after story of them getting shot and what happened. One of the kids who got shot had actually prevented a shooting a couple of hours early in the park and told someone else to put this gun away. He ended up getting shot 2 hours later. I asked every single one, did anybody get caught with any consequences? Nothing. Zero. 75% of our city's violence is concentrated in just 15 neighborhoods. So downtown is pretty nice. Hyde Park, where we live, is pretty nice. Lincoln Park is pretty nice. But 15 neighborhoods are absorbing 75% of the violence. And 75% of our victims and shooters are young black men ages 17 to 24. So those are facts. And let me now shift from facts to what I believe. And beliefs are obviously different. These are my conclusions. Happy to debate these. I actually hope I'm wrong on a number of them. But I just want to walk through what I believe, what I'm learning based upon the facts, based upon what we're seeing. First, I believe that collectively we are failing, that none of us are doing enough. We're failing our city, we're failing our communities, and I think most damning, we're failing our kids. Our kids and young men are living with a level of fear and trauma that's almost unimaginable to folks in this room. Secondly, I believe this is an absolute crisis, and it represents the biggest threat to our city's reputation, and that it's unsustainable. Third, I believe that the police cannot solve this by themselves, that this is an economic challenge and not just an issue of crime. We can't simply arrest our way out of this problem. Fourth, I think that mass incarceration hasn't worked, and that using it as a rural economic development strategy that relies on a steady supply of urban black and Hispanic men to keep prison guards employed represents America at its worst, not at its finest. Fifth, I believe that through our actions, and often through our inactions, we value black and brown lives less than we value others. Put another way, I believe that we would not have allowed 762 people to get shot last year who looked like me and Jay and not like Eric and Terry. I believe that to solve this, we have to get proximate with the problem and to do things and to go places that make us uncomfortable. All of us have to get outside our comfort zones. And finally, this is more hopeful. I believe that in every crisis, there's real opportunity. I actually think we have an amazing opportunity ahead of us. I'm not just hopeful that we can get to a much better place. I'm actually every day more and more convinced that we can. And let me tell you why, despite all the challenges, despite all the negativity, why I'm actually very, very optimistic. 3 things. One, because it's so violent, it's so tough out there, many of our young men are looking to get out. Secondly, and this is counterintuitive in rooms like this, due to the fracturing and the decentralization of gangs, the lack of structure, we now have like 600 gangs here in Chicago, that very few people are making any money on the street. And there's this myth, a stereotype that all these drug dealers are making tons of money. And this is an issue that I've tested myself dozens and dozens of times. Started to do this about 3 or 4 years ago when I'd come home to Chicago and just talk to guys and find out. And it was always sort of a simple question that we all have a price point. I always sort of said, here's the grand bargain. What if we were to hire you? What if we were to give you a job? What would we have to pay you to get you to walk away from the streets and put down the guns and stop shooting? And consistently, it's $12, $13 an hour. It's peanuts. It's peanuts. Guys have said $200 a week. One guy said $600 a week, and he was a guy with 2 young kids. A lot of guys just say, just a stable paycheck. Knowing people aren't shooting at me, knowing the police aren't chasing me. And the fact that as a society, we're very, very happy to lock guys up at Cook County Jail at $50,000, $55,000, $60,000 per head per year, but won't employ them for $25,000, $27,000, $30,000. I simply don't understand. And lastly, and I think most importantly, why I'm so hopeful and optimistic, is that we just have amazing young men who live on the south and west sides of Chicago, who have the potential not just to lead positive, productive lives themselves, but actually help lead our city and lead their communities where we need to go. And let me just tell you quickly just a little bit about the guys that we're working with. Our guys have been through a lot. One of our guys' earliest memories was of his father shooting heroin. As he grew older, he actually ended up selling heroin to his father. And we talked about that. And I've heard stories like that, and he said, Arne, it was actually an act of love. And I'm like, that's a new one. Explain that to me. And he did. He said that on the street, often heroin is cut with fentanyl, and fentanyl kills people. And he sold his father pure heroin. He sold him enough to keep him going, but not enough to kill him. And he thought by selling him that pure heroin, he was actually keeping him alive. That was his reality. Another young man told me he grew up in a household full of guns. He said he wished they would have had more toys, but they just had guns. A third, Darius in the back, was shot 3 times coming out of church. And many, not all, but many of our guys, and many guys that I speak with at Cook County Jail, around 11, 12, 13, they become the men of their homes. And dad is locked up or gone, mom is on drugs or an alcoholic. And they have to start to make some money. And sometimes, not always, they're the eldest sibling. And they have to eat. They have to have a roof over their head. They have to have clothes. And they have to start to earn some money. And they have one person to go to get a job. And that's the guy in the corner. That guy is always there, and he is always hiring. And all of us in rooms like this, we are absent from their lives. One young guy told me, I just got tired of hearing my mother cry at night. I had to go do something. And I asked him, did you have a mentor? Do you have a role model? Do you have someone you go work with? And, it's like I'm speaking a foreign language. Of course not. And this work is tough. It is humbling. And one of the biggest things I'm learning is not to judge. And I'm the eldest of 3. I was lucky enough to grow up in a great family with 2 educated parents and a roof over my head and never worried about food. But had I not had those things, and I had to provide for my sister and brother, I can't say I would have made a different choice. And I'm increasingly convinced that many, many of our young guys have made very, very rational choices because there were no other choices. It was a choice of last resort. And all we're trying to do is just present a second rational choice. And I'm convinced not all, but many, many men will take advantage of that second chance. But despite all those challenges, despite all those issues, or maybe actually because of them, our guys have this extraordinary potential to do good. One of our guys is committed to fixing and rehabbing all the homes, all the buildings on his block that are abandoned, having them, rather than being eyesores and places of criminal activity, actually making his block thrive again. A couple of our guys, 2 brothers, want to open up a landscaping business. Another guy wants to have us host, he's challenged us to host a Father's Day picnic in the neighborhood, and he's actually fighting for custody of his young child. A bunch of our guys are now starting to go out and speak to others and be part of the community, be leaders. Different forums just like this, where they are far more articulate, far more passionate, far clearer on the issues than I am. So what are we trying to do? And we're making huge mistakes every day and learning hard lessons and making this up each day as we go along. But starting last September, so we've been at it 7 months roughly, we just started working with a group of about 30 guys out in the Rose and Pullman neighborhood. That neighborhood wasn't picked very strategically, frankly. It was an area where there was a real need, and David Doig happened to have she's a fantastic partner, happened to have some homes that our guys could work on, so we just decided to go there. And so there's 2 pillars to our work. One is, to be very clear, these are not boys, these are men. They have to eat, they have to feed themselves, they have to have a roof over their heads, many are fathers. And they are going to make money one way or another. And they can make it on the street, in the illegal economy, and that inevitably leads to violence, or they can make it legally. So we hired them, and we paid them $15 an hour. Guys might disagree with me. It's probably a little bit high. That was my fault, but we want to let them know they're serious. Our second cohort, we started $11 an hour, and we're going to grow that. And we're also building in lots of social and emotional support. Many of our guys have lived with trauma from the day they were born, working through that, working through other issues. For a bunch of tough guys in our first group, about a third were almost homeless. One guy was living on a porch, one guy was living in a car. Substance abuse issues, just helping deal with the reality of their life. We talk a lot about post-traumatic stress disorder. This is not post anything. This is current. This is every single day. One of our guys, one of the stars, leaders in our program, talks about every time he goes home at night, he circles his block sometimes 2, 3, 4 times. He knows every alleyway, he knows every driveway, he knows every car that's supposed to be there. And if something looks out of place, he's not safe to get out of his car, and he'll just go around the block one more time. How many of us, when we go home, are making those calculations? But that's what he has to do to survive. So 2 pillars: legal income, social emotional support, and building a real brotherhood. These are guys who come from rival cliques, rival factions. Some knew each other, some didn't know each other, some were friends, some frankly were enemies on the street. But they're supporting each other in extraordinarily powerful ways. They're going to lead us where we need to go. It's not us. We've worked doing home deconstruction with David. Kara's been a fantastic partner. Maria Kim is here and really helping do neighborhood beautification. And guys that may have been doing some things that weren't fantastic for the community are starting to do very positive things and be seen by neighbors doing those things and be seen by themselves of doing those things. And again, these are simple lessons that are coming back to me, but just the power and the dignity of work. We worked with guys who were 17 to 24-year-old young black men because that was 75% of where the challenge was. And the profile of victims and perpetrators are identical. They are one and the same. Those guys being shoot are often the shooters and vice versa. The epiphany I had going back a little ways was I've worked in prevention all my life and hope someday to get back to an education side, but that if we want to stop the violence, if we want to stop the shooting, we have to work directly with those who are shooting or being shot. We can't work in other spaces and solve that problem. And we have to walk and chew gum at the same time. We have to keep working the prevention side. There's nothing more important. But we can't just do that and not work with 17 to 24, 25, 26, 27-year-old young men. We're not going to get there. We've got to be in the game. And what these guys are doing is extraordinary. Every day is a challenge. Every day we have issues. Every day me and my team are making real mistakes and learning. I tell our guys all the time, we are co-designing this with you. If something's working, great. If something's not working, let us know. They're not shy. They let us know when things make sense and when they don't. But collectively, 6, 7 months in, we're much farther along than I thought possible. So we go forward into spring. As I said, we started with a second cohort in Rosen Pullman. We'll probably add a third cohort. Cohort for us is 20 to 30. Again, this idea of brotherhood and camaraderie and just having guys support each other in this very difficult but exciting journey. There's a power there that we can't begin to do by ourselves. We'll go soon, hopefully into Englewood, into Austin, North Lawndale, and try and keep growing this thing. We've been blessed to have a number of businesses who have committed to hiring. We're providing what we call transition jobs, 5, 6, 7, 8 months, stabilize guys, get them on a good spot, then transition to the legal economy. We have a number of employees who have committed to hiring, which is fantastic. We're continuing to build that pipeline. We're also thinking a lot about social enterprises and what businesses can we bring to these neighborhoods. And these neighborhoods have had massive disinvestment for years. There's always a correlation between crime and lack of economic investment and unemployment. If we can start to have our guys create businesses in their own neighborhoods, that's going to be extraordinarily powerful. And then let me just close quickly, and I'm happy to take your questions. So just sort of a vision of where this thing can go. You think about these neighborhoods, we all know them: Austin, North Lawndale, Englewood, Garfield Park. We can go through them. You know, maybe not a lot of assets right now or from the outside, but they all have abandoned buildings. I'm told, again, I don't quite believe this, I'm told Englewood has 4,000 abandoned buildings. Think if our guys, pick a number, 50, 100, 150 in every neighborhood, Englewood, North Lawndale, Austin. What if we were hiring guys from the community to take community liabilities, to take dangerous buildings and fix them up and rehab them and actually live in them? The lack of affordable housing, the lack of places for our guys to live has actually been stunning to me. I totally underestimated that challenge. We're still dealing with that every single day. So think about it as a vision, as a city, neighborhood by neighborhood, every year, 50, 100, 150 homes. Our guys are gaining skills and doing that hard work every single day. These are young guys, they work hard, they have these skills. It's a great place for them to be. Another little bit of a radical idea, think if we didn't just give the homes to our guys and to the community, what if we offered them to police officers to actually live in these neighborhoods? I think that'd be one of the best violence prevention things we could do, is actually have police live in these neighborhoods. What if our guys and the police, who are often rivals, who are often challenging each other, what if they're actually working together to build these homes? Think what that would do. Secondly, we're still tiny. And again, relative to the size of the problem, we're nowhere near scale yet. We're trying to start to scale probably too fast, but we're pushing hard there. But the police have something many of you probably heard of called the Strategic Subjects List, SSL. And that list isn't perfect, but it's an algorithm that has a pretty fair indication of those in the city most at risk of shooting or being shot. And again, that profile is one the same. These are not two lists. This is one list. Think if we just took the 1,000 or the 2,000 guys on that list, most at risk of shooting or being shot. And what if we offered to give them a job? What if we offered to pay them to gain some skills and get the wraparound services and the social emotional support and the trauma care and the parenting skills and the substance abuse that they need and deserve? And let me be clear, not every guy will take advantage of that. Some guys may love the street life. Some guys might like to shoot. Some guys might like to kill. But that's a minority. And I'm absolutely convinced the majority of guys want to come our way. We go to Cook County Jail about once a month. Every time I'm there, I ask the question, what's your price point? What would it take? $12, $13, everybody says, I'm out. I'm out. I'll do something different. There's a lot of talk about disconnected youth. I don't like that term anymore. I used to use it. None of us are from Rosen-Pullman. A couple of us are from the South Side. Like, how do you find these guys? They're disconnected. We had two guys, Kurt and Craig, found them in like 7 days. They weren't hard to find. They're out there. We're disconnected from them. They're not disconnected from us. Our second cohort, paying $11 an hour, 36 guys. We got a waiting list right now. We got to start to scale as fast as we can. Guys are looking to change. They're looking to do something different. So think as a city, we go from 30 to 60 to a couple hundred. What if we could go to 2,000? These numbers aren't overwhelming. There aren't 20,000 people running around shooting each other in Chicago. It's not like that. These numbers are manageable. A city this big, this many resources and rooms like this, we can't think about employing 2,000 guys and giving them a chance. And to be clear, this is not a get out of jail card. If they mess up, the police need to do their job. But let's give them a chance to go in a different direction, a chance they haven't had. And I tell our guys all the time, we're late in the game. Again, these are men, not boys. I'm so sorry we weren't there earlier in your lives. Collectively, we have all let you down. Often, frankly, their families, schools, the churches, the nonprofits, the social service agencies. Again, we weren't there, but the guy on the block was. Rain, cold, snow, sleet, shine, that's who's there. That's who's present. We got to start to be present. We got to start to be proximate. This idea of going citywide, there's a set of nonprofits and social service agencies and philanthropic organizations starting to think about, can we do this citywide? And learn and make mistakes and fail. But think if we could take the 2,000 guys most at risk of shooting and being shot and reduce their risk dramatically. Think what that would mean. Final point, I'm happy to take your questions, just sort of, for me, what does success look like? For me, I think we collectively would have arrived when we start to see our young men not as part of the problem, and not as part of the solution, but as the solution. Our goal is not to solve this. We can't do it. Our goal must be to empower and challenge and support and to love our young men as they solve this thing together. Thank you so much. I'm happy to take your questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Duncan. And if anyone has any questions that they would like to address to our speaker, please just hold them up. Members of our staff will circulate around and pick them up. Thank you, Latrice. Okay. Very first question from Dave Chisower. Dave, where? He's not here? Oh, okay. Good. Dave, in big black print, it says you're not a member of the City Club. We want to take care of that before you leave. Staff, catch him on the way out. His big question is, how much does it cost to properly educate a typical CPS ninth grader? If you could respond to that, both in public school, charter school, et cetera.
Well, it's all the same. I think that the math of this is not hard. what it costs to educate a ninth grade in Chicago is the same that it costs to educate them well in Evanston or Winnetka and Wilmette, Lake Forest. And that number is about twice what we have here in Chicago Public Schools. And the fact that the children in our state, the children of the wealthy, get so much more spent on their education each year than the children of the poor, that's a huge challenge. And for me, obviously, my love of education is education should be the great equalizer. That it shouldn't matter race or zip code or economic status or whatever, that if you have a chance to get a great public education, you have a chance to do anything in life. But where education actually exacerbates the divide between the haves and the have-nots, we actually make the problem worse, not better. And sadly, in the state of Illinois, we choose to provide twice as much funding for the children of the wealthy than we do for the children of the poor, and it's not fair.
Okay, this is from Dr. Suzette McKinney. Doctor, can I actually read this doctor's question? Thank you very much, Suzette. She's tremendous. Regarding the price point and job availability, what type of response have you gotten to your calls to the business community to step up and offer jobs to young men?
Yeah, so lots of folks have said, well, these guys are too risky, folks will never hire. Well, the truth is we have now, it's a growing list, about 2 dozen businesses that have committed to hiring at the back end. And, we got to continue to grow that list as we think about numbers. But, again, our goal is to give guys transition jobs for 6, 7, 8 months and really stabilize them and help to mitigate that risk and then have them go in the back end. But just one example, we have Berglund Construction. Stand up. So one of our guys is now working at Berglund making $24 an hour. It's a life-changing opportunity. And I don't think that's a risk that they're taking. I think they're getting an amazing employee. It's a different talent pool, and I think he's doing an extraordinary job. And one of their best project managers, so they understood this better than most, one of their best project managers, they put on all their trouble jobs, all their tough jobs, that was a former gang leader who had been incarcerated for a while. So all of us have done some things in the past maybe we're not so proud of. The questions that sort of lock us out of this situation forever. And I'll take the next question, but before I go on, can I have our young men from our Chicago Cred program, please stand, let's give them a huge round of applause.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, gentlemen. Arne, you've talked about the fact that you're working with these 17 to 24-year-old young men. What about women? Are you involved with women at all? Excuse me, Karen,
It's a great question, and the truth is going forward we need to do more. And so we're just trying to be both focused and driven by the data. The fact of the matter is that 98, 99% of those shooting and being shot are men, not women. But we are really understanding how important women are in the lives of our young men. And whether it's mothers, whether it's grandmothers, whether it's significant others, sometimes those are very healthy relationships. Sometimes, candidly, those are very unhealthy relationships. And what we can do to help build healthier families, we have to work on. So we're working on some parenting classes. We're starting to try and do some stuff with again, partners and moms. So that's an area where I think we need to expand and grow, but we're trying to be focused, again, on the problem. It's very easy to work on lots of other things. There's lots of other hugely important work in the city that I want to personally help support and work on, but we're trying to keep ourselves focused on those most likely to shoot or being shot, because I think that's the only way we can reduce gun violence in the city.
Thank you, Arne. This is from former member of the Chicago Board of Education. She was a member of the Board of Education, City Club Governor Martha Jantho. How are you funded?
Good to see Martha. So Emerson Collective is sort of the nonprofit or the philanthropic wing of Lorene Powell Jobs' work. Lorene Powell Jobs is the widow of Steve Jobs. She's been extraordinarily generous and supportive of our work. We've sort of spun that off as our own nonprofit called Chicago Cred here in town, and our funding comes from Lorene.
Okay. This is from Jim Turman, who's sitting right down here, City Club member. Gangs and gun availability, does that make Chicago unique from other urban cities?
So the hard question, I'm not an expert, is why is Chicago so much worse than other cities? And there probably, I think all these issues like education are complex. It's like 10 reasons. So it's actually, they're interesting, very tough public policy questions. So going back 10, 15, 20 years, the police did a pretty good job of arresting and locking up a bunch of the big gang leaders in town. In some ways that makes sense. But you actually had structures and hierarchy and something that made a little bit of sense, and all that's gone. And again, I talked to the gang crimes commander. I don't quite believe him, but I have to believe him. He says we now have 600 gangs in Chicago. It's sort of stunning. And if you think about gangs and factions and cliques, if you think about those as countries or warring countries, it's just that many more borders now. So every 2 blocks, you got now not men, but 15, 16-year-old little kids running around saying that's their block. And it's just like the Wild West. And those alliances and factions change all the time. Some of this violence is, inter-gang. Some of this is intra-gang. A lot of the stuff is driven by Facebook and social media that didn't exist years ago. So police did something that sort of makes sense, but did that exacerbate it? I'm not sure. Second very interesting one is the tearing down of public housing in Chicago. And I think public housing was a disaster. I was happy to see it come down and not literally ghettoize entire people and communities. But when you spread people out into communities who hadn't lived together, coming from different factions, not having the social supports and social services they need, that actually just helped to dissipate or spread the violence throughout the city. So these are very tough issues. I don't have easy answers on them. Big one you talked about was the availability of guns. Ask our guys. It's so easy to get a gun out there. It is so easy. It is cheap. And again, if we value lives more, we would do something differently about guns in this nation. And somehow we prize our right to bear arms a lot. We value our right to bear arms a lot more than we value our lives. And we pay a devastating price for that in places like Chicago.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is from Sharon Lindstrom. Sharon, where are you? Oh, she's over there. She says she's not yet a member, so staff, she's leaning. Don't let her leave. $35, ladies and gentlemen. It's the best investment you can make. City Club of Chicago. You get to come and hear people like Arne Duncan and others. Her question, what specifically can we in this room do to support the Chicago CRED vision, which I guess is mentors, job opportunities, etc.?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. Our guys were so privileged last Sunday to have President Obama come out and spend 2 hours with them, and it was one of the most moving experiences of my life. And the President came and spent probably the first hour, more than an hour, he just listened, and every single guy stood up and told their story. And it was real, it was raw, it was emotional, it was inspirational. There were tears, and there are a couple themes that sort of came out of that. One is that just the lack of role models and lack of mentors in their lives. And I don't know if we have a single guy whose father was a strong presence in their life. One of the things we've done is we have some amazing life coaches who we commit to a year of life coaching with the guys, and we'll probably extend that to 18 months. And so yes, mentors, role models, again, just guys different from the guy in the corner to support and be there. Secondly, the guys talked a lot about the decisions they were making before our program, just going back 7 months. A lot of what was driving their behavior was they didn't have any hope. They didn't think anybody cared about them. In fact, they knew nobody cared about them. So they just did whatever because they could do whatever to whoever because no one worried about them. And just having some hope now, having an opportunity. Again, they're the same person, just a different opportunity structure than they had before, and they're making radically different life choices. So whether it's mentoring, whether it's employment opportunities, many of our guys have entrepreneurial skills and interests, helping them develop business plans and sort of build these things out. Again, the social enterprise piece of this is huge. We have close to 24 businesses that have committed jobs. What if we had 200 businesses in this city that provide, were committed to jobs? So this can't be charity. This has to be an investment. It's going to move you outside of your comfort zone a little bit by definition. But let's go back. Unless you're willing to do some things differently, we're going to keep getting the same results. And for me, that's not tenable.
Okay, Arne, this is from A.J. Taylor Vanderpool with the Gary Comer Youth Center. How do you work with local organizations to help identify the young men for the cohorts for the program?
Yeah, I should say two things. That as we grow, our team is tiny. We have 11 people. We're not going to build some army. So as we continue to expand and work with more cohorts, our team is not doing that work ourselves. We're doing it with the first cohort. Second cohort, we have amazing partners, Mr. and Mrs. Jones from the Rosen community have been doing this work forever. As we go to Austin and North Lawndale and Englewood, we'll be working with great partners and supporting them and learning together and building a learning community. But all of this work is going to come, from the community. And so finding those great partners, working with them, they're the ones going to do the real hard work, not us. And again, in terms of finding guys, it's not hard. It's not hard. Again, the number of guys looking to change their lives, if I can leave you with any message, no, it is, the vast majority of guys are looking to do something different. Not that it's easy, not that this happens overnight, not that change and transformation doesn't take months, if not years, but they're looking to get out. So again, we found that first cohort with 2 guys in less than 2 weeks. Second cohort, family members, friends, relatives from the first cohort, word of mouth. And Cook County Jail has been a great partner. As guys come out of Cook County Jail, they're referring them to us and we're taking them in. So finding guys is not the hard part of this work. Having more partners, having more opportunities, that's sort of our gating factor as we try and scale.
Thank you, Arnie. This is from City Club member Stephen Blend. What would you like the people in this room to do to help programs like yours?
And again, I just think we're a small piece of this. We have to sort of think about this way beyond us and think about this as a city. So I'll repeat what I said before. We need mentors. We need role models. We need people willing to help young men develop their own business plans and build their social enterprises. We need companies who are willing to hire. We need folks who will do counseling and social and emotional support. We need help on substance abuse. The lack of housing is stunning. In our second cohort, and again, these are, theoretically tough young men. In our second cohort, numbers almost identical. About a third of the guys basically homeless. So in all of these areas, we're just trying to build healthy communities. And most of us in this room are lucky to go home to healthy communities each night. And we have neighborhoods on the south and west side that aren't healthy and haven't been healthy for a long time. So none of this is rocket science, just whether we're serious about doing this. The final thing would be, can we create businesses, not opportunities, not just downtown, which we need those too, but can we start to create businesses in our guys' neighborhoods and help those become vibrant? So we're talking to folks like Shinola that you may have heard of that's doing great work in Detroit, and hopefully we're bringing them to the south side soon. We have Whole Foods, which is in Englewood, and my wife and I try and shop there and support them, and those are great stories, but those are 1 and maybe 2. We need 200 of those. And when we start to get to that, then I guarantee you, a lot of these issues go away.
Okay, we'll give you a real easy question now. This is from Ray Lauk with School District 89. Ray, where are you? Here. Oh, over here. Have you ever thought of running for public office? He'd like you to run for governor.
No, sir.
Very wise and thought-out answer. We have a number of questions here from Tina Giordano from McGill University up there in Canada, and Marge Main Goldblatt. And they want to know about, is there a way that Chicago can make guns less accessible? We've had Superintendent Johnson here, and he's talked about that, Senator Raoul in that. From your perspective.
So if I could wave a magic wand, I would take away all the guns. And you would still have hurt people, you would still have people with very tough backgrounds, and we still need to do a lot of work with them in terms of social and emotional support, but they wouldn't be shooting at each other. We live in a nation that loves its guns. And I'll go back to my naivety, and again, me learning hard lessons. And I've said this publicly, so hopefully it's not news, but when I ran the Chicago public schools, I thought gun laws would never change as long as it was black and brown kids being killed. And I hate to say this, but I thought it would take white kids being killed for gun laws to change. And then, I've talked about this publicly, President Obama's talked about this publicly, the hardest day of his presidency, and hardest day I had in DC, and obviously the President of the United States deals with the hardest issues on the planet. His hardest day was the day of the Sandy Hook massacre, Newtown, Connecticut, where you had 20 white babies and 5 teachers as the principal killed. And I remember getting the calls of the first responders on the way to that scene and starting to get a sense of the horror of it. I think the president went down the next day. The vice president and I went down 3 or 4 days later and met with the families. And the fact that subsequent to that, we got 0 done, 0. I give us an F in terms of any legislation, common sense gun legislation. That's a stunning failure. That's a stunning failure. Not to go on too long on this, but it's an important one. My wife is from Australia. In Australia 20 years ago, actually in her home state of Tasmania, they had a massacre there. 30, 35 people killed. Subsequent, they changed the gun laws. There was actually, interesting, a conservative prime minister who changed the gun laws. Took a lot of heat. I think he actually ultimately lost his job. But in the 20 years since in Australia, there has not been one mass shooting. Not one. So that's the gift Australia gave to its children. Think of what we have given or not given to our children, not just here in Chicago, but this is rural America, this is suburban America, this is on Native American reservations. We are captive to the gun lobby. And Australia, England, Japan, Canada, I can go right down other civilized nations, none of whom have anywhere near the level of violence and tragedy and heartbreak that we allow. So it is a choice we make to live with this, and it's a heartbreaking one.
Okay, very last question, and then we'll have our drawing. There's been some stories lately in the paper over the weekend about the South Shore community, and that's a community in danger of tipping and becoming in some ways like some of the communities you're working in. How do you suggest and how would your group approach working with a community like that?
And again, I just want to be very, very clear that we don't have this all figured out. I want to keep saying we're making mistakes, we're learning. But having said that, this work is hard, it's humbling, but it's also not rocket science. And I think you have to go to the guys who are most at risk. You have to embrace them. You have to walk with them. You have to learn from them. You have to give them a set of opportunities in the legal economy that simply haven't existed. You got to expect failure. You got to expect setbacks. But guys have more than met us halfway. And there's nothing unique about South Shore relative to other neighborhoods. Lots of places are struggling right now. And again, as all of us who travel internationally or talk to people internationally, people used to want to ask about the Bulls and Michael Jordan. The first question for me always now is about violence. People have no idea what I'm doing anymore. It's the first question people ask. So for me, it's not about South Shore or Englewood or Austin or London. I mean, it's part of it, but what are we going to stand for as a city? Can we not hire 2,000 guys? A city of this much wealth, this much political capital? Is that asking too much, really? So what we need to do for South Shore is the same we need to do for every other community. We need to hire, we need to support, we need to create opportunity. I don't want to blow through the prevention side. We need to keep doing a lot more on the prevention side. But if I can leave anything, these are good guys. These are some amazing guys back here. And if we can just create some opportunities that haven't existed, that's going to take us a heck of a long way.
Speaking of Michael Jordan, you know, if Reinsdorf calls you, we could use a little help. And this man certainly knows how to put the ball into the hoop.